no plans at all. Evil man's always transcending. Fighter like sheep, swallow everything. Always simpletons or pretending.
This is your moment of clarity coming to you today from Washington, D.C. Recently, investigative journalist Greg Palast revealed a leaked memo between Larry Summers and Timothy Geithner talking about their plans for the quote-unquote endgame of the World Trade Organization. The contents of that memo would make steam shoot out of a Zen master's earballs. But we'll get to that in a second. The chairman of the Federal Reserve is one of the most powerful economic positions in the world. And whether you believe the Fed should exist or not, you can admit the Fed chairman has a lot of power. So here's a really tough question. Should we avoid giving that position to one of the guys who brought the global financial system to its knees? Does a bear shit in the woods? Sure they do. But that's a ridiculous expression. Perhaps a better expression is, would it be ridiculous for me to talk about a bear's pooping habits at this juncture in our conversation? Yeah, absolutely. Plus, there are some bears that live inside zoos. They must think to themselves, damn, what I would give to shit in the woods, rather than doing it in this 10-foot enclosure with a 5-year-old watching me pressing his snot-nosed, freckled face up against the glass. If I could get out of here, I would eat the fuck out of that kid, and then I would shit him out in the woods. And then everybody would have to change that stupid expression to, does a bear shit a 5-year-old out in the woods? The Endgame memo goes back to 1997 when a small group of bankers were looking to demolish financial regulation around the world in order to gamble everybody's money on a new game called derivatives. In order to do that, they needed to deregulate the banks of all the WTO nations rather than just the United States. So Summers and Geithner and a few other sleaze-faced greed viruses figured they could force the 156 nations to accept the deregulation by threatening to take away trade with the United States. And they were right. Basically, every nation opened their markets to derivatives. They opened their doors to a Trojan horse catastrophe presented by Summers and Geithner on a silver platter. And a few short years later, as Greg Palast writes, derivatives had set everything on fire. Unemployment in Spain is 26%. There's desperation and hunger in Greece. Riots in Indonesia. Detroit's bankrupt. There's 5 times more empty, foreclosed upon houses dotting the American landscape than there are homeless people. And there are the most homeless people in New York City since the Great Depression. But it's not all bad news. Summers and his buddies got much richer and found themselves in more high-powered positions. They won the endgame. And now Obama and others are saying that none other than Larry Summers should be the new chairman of the Federal Reserve. People should be fucking livid, man. Putting Summers in charge of the Federal Reserve is like putting George Zimmerman in charge of the NAACP, or putting Lance Armstrong in charge of the DEA, or putting the Westboro Baptist Church in charge of sensitivity training. It's like putting Dick Cheney in charge of a children's bake sale to raise money for puppies with restless leg syndrome. And they have more legs. It's like putting the boogeyman in charge of underbed security. It's like putting Miley Cyrus in charge of stabilizing asses, or putting Vin Diesel in as the lead in a production of the Canterbury Tales performed in the original Old English. It's like putting Glenn Beck in charge of anything. It's like putting the executives at MTV in charge of television programming. It's like putting a fish in charge of teaching people to fly helicopters. I'm clearly running out of things that are as horrible as putting Larry Summers in charge of the Federal Reserve. This in-game memo should get Summers put in jail, and instead he could end up in one of the most powerful positions in the world. Is that a bad idea? Does an escaped zoo bear shit a 5-year-old in the woods? Damn straight he does. That's been your moment of clarity from LeeCamp.net. Read Greg Palast's whole article on this topic, on this memo. I'll put the link in the description. Also spread the word. This is not a right or left issue. Stop this criminal from becoming chairman of the Federal Reserve. And finally, as a little side note, we have put up an index of all 260 moments of clarity over at leecamp.net. You can easily scroll through them and watch them under the Moment of Clarity tab at my website. Keep fighting.
Walk in your